there is more nuances between behavior change and conversion performances. So actually that's something that make our design works even more interesting than before.
We remove the guesswork in anything that we are designing, or even before we design some solution. It sort of help us like to prioritize which problems to tackle first, right?
Hello and welcome to the Design Explorers, a podcast by the Agoda design team. Agoda.com is a global digital travel platform where you can book hotels, vacation rentals, flights, and airport transfer. In this podcast, we will be sharing the awesome work of our design team, discuss interesting trends in relation to design and travel, and talk about product design in general. My name is Nachum Yamin and I will be your host for the show. Today's episode is all about the relationship between data and design. Here at Agoda, we trust data to inform our design decisions and provide the best experience for our users. I've sat down for a conversation with Zhou, a design manager, and Javier, a senior UX designer, to talk about how designers in our team are using data. Have a nice listening, and I hope you will enjoy the show. Welcome to our first episode of the Design Explorers. I am very happy to have Joshua and Javier here with me today to discuss about how we are using data in the design process and how they have started this initiative of making data more accessible and meaningful for our design team. Joshua and Javier, welcome to our show.
Thanks, Nahum. I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here.
Before we start with our topic for today, let's give our listeners some background about who you are and what is your role here at Agoda. Joshua, maybe we can start with you. You've been at Agoda for almost 5 years now, starting as a UX designer and growing to becoming a design manager.
Yeah, you're right. I've been here for almost 5 years, and I witnessed the design team's growth over this almost 5 years. So for the first 3 years, I worked on the consumer-facing product. You can understand as a web and also mobile app where the users can use to book their hotels for their trip. And we practiced a lot of like A/B testing at that time. Because Agoda is a data-driven, so we rely heavily on that. And now, thanks for the opportunities that I'm, managing a team working on the enterprise side. So basically, how you understand this enterprise side. So you can simply understand that the product that are the ones that we allowed our hotel partners to manage their inventory on our platform, and also the product for a consumer experience specialist to handle the customer support. So in these particular scenarios, we define the term of user, or say customers are actually the hotels or our partners' service specialist, but not the travelers who use the app to book the trips.
And Javier, you are a senior UX designer that has been working on the experience of both the Agoda web and app for almost 4 years now, right?
Yeah, you're right. I've been here for 4 years now, and mostly working on the traveler side, which is involving the both platforms, which is app and also web. And I sort of started backwards actually. So when I first joined, I worked on booking form and then moved back to the funnel, which is property page, and then also search page basically. So yeah, it's pretty cool. And then I've learned a lot throughout these years. And then the cool thing about like being able to work in full funnels is that it sort of helped me to understand what type of data that is available in each funnel, in each page, and then also like to understand the business as a whole. So yeah, it's been pretty long journey, and then also eventful journey. Like it's quite fun actually, and luckily I still haven't feel bored yet.
Yeah, still have a lot of stuff to learn.
Yeah.
Still get great learnings here. I think that's why, we are still working, in Agoda here.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
In our first episode today, we are talking about data. And here at Agoda, as you know, we as designer have a lot of data at our disposal, but it is not always easy for us to include it as part of our design process. And you guys are actually working on making it easier. But before we go into that, let's begin with the basic question of what does data even means?
Okay, so just for this podcast purposes, like let's all agree that when you talk about data, we are talking about quantitative data, right? So within Agora itself, like the types of quantitative data can be anything that we are tracking on our product, right? Can be like number of clicks or number of visit, right? How many people have seen this element or UI element and things like that. So yeah, so basically those are the type of data that we use often, right? Mostly in the front end facing world.
Yeah, just now Javi mentioned about quantitative data. So I think there is a very simple way for us to differentiate quantitative versus qualitative. For us, if you go to agoda.com, you are trying to do a destination search. You type in the city and you click the search button. And when you go to the search result page, so if you notice that we have a filter on the top, the users can use to filter for the price range, for special offers or something like that. So the filter on the top is something so for the filters, if the users use this filter to get that result and make the bookings or not, and this actually is the insights of qualitative insights.
So anything that you observe, right?
Like anything that you observe that if what is the user behavior look like? That's how the user behave on the site. That's the qualitative side. That's the qualitative insights. And how so if the user actually use the filter, and we know this is a user pattern, and how to understand the pattern is okay, what is the percentage of the user actually use the filter to make the booking? Then this is a quantitative insights.
Yeah, actually the actual number, like for example, how many users are actually using free breakfast, for example, and then book a hotel, right? So that's quantitative. Sorry. And also to expand on the qualitative side, like the easiest way to look at it is also like any type of data that you get from user testing, for example, right? Or user lab, right? Or yeah, I think that's the easiest way to distinguish between those two types of data, basically.
So quantitative help us understand what is happening.
Yeah.
Yes.
And qualitative help us understand why it's happening.
Yes.
Why
Why
the
and
user
how.
behave like that.
Yes, exactly.
Why and
exactly.
how.
Yeah.
Exactly. What is happening, and also to which extent that happened.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about your ongoing initiative, which is basically trying to make it easier for designers in our team to access and understand data. What and how, made you start this initiative?
Okay. So do you want an official answer or a personal answer?
I want your answer.
Okay, cool. So yeah, officially, I think everyone's thinking about what is the next step for UX designer to succeed in the internet company like Agoda. So I think for data is something that we can use as a domain to upskill ourselves. But actually, for personal story, actually that was a very funny. At first, I when I was working on the product that specifically targeting a certain user segment, at that time I bother our data team a lot by sending them a lot of emails to asking some stupid questions sometimes. But most of our questions are data related. So what I experienced is, okay, so I send the question to them. It usually took like 2 weeks before they actually get the questions answered, and sometimes I need to rephrase the question again and again so that I can get the similar data points result based on the same theme that I asked for. So and at each times I think the question is very easy. Because of the waiting queue is very long, I need to wait another months to get my question answered. So that which means I missed a lot of good opportunity for me to pitch a very good design initiative to the key stakeholders.
So basically, you're frustrated with the speed.
Well,
right?
Not really frustrated because we have a official procedure for managing those data requests
That's
from
true.
all of the teams. and design team is also part of it. So actually, the data team is very supportive, but because Agoda is a very big company, we have thousands of employees here.
Yeah.
So they cannot really answer every person's data question.
Every request. Yeah.
Every request. That's
pretty sure they have like probably thousands of requests per week, basically.
Yeah. You can see the workload is very high. So I think instead of suffering from waiting, I think, hey, what if I learn how to query by myself? It sounds like a crazy idea at the beginning, because I'm seeing some like crazy codings in the SQL query that the data team is working on. But I think maybe for some simple questions I can start with. So that's why I started to learn the SQL query. But that everything was changed at that time. So I think learning SQL query actually opened another new door for me to step into the business world of Agoda, because previously we work on the design, and we are not really having a very strong standpoint in the organization. And sometimes if you want to drive something from design standpoint, the flow that we went through is we need to be well prepared for the rationale of why we should do this, because Agoda is performance driven. But now we have capability of data. Now we can ask the data the right data question, and then we can back up our design decisions. So I think that's simply how things started from my side. And actually because we are working as a team, and we have been here for a while, and the team actually grew for a while for the past couple of years. And we also need to think about what is the next step for the team as well. So team maturity level are related to the design quality, but also could be related to the data-driven culture, because Agoda is data-driven company. So that's why that's the initiative come out.
And Javier, how did this initiative started for you?
So to me, it's very natural in a way, I think. Right? So basically, it all started with, like Joshua mentioned, is like the need. There's a need for the team to level up, and also working with all the product managers makes me realize that we also need to speak the same language as them, right? And because all the PMs here are basically only speaking one language, which is data, right? So for us to work smoothly with them, I think it makes sense for us to understand data, right? And yes, starting from that, I sort of like naturally goes into this world, right? Similar to Joshua, and then Joshua also mentioned that he learned SQL, and I also started learning SQL by myself, right? And then which is not, I had a background before, but it just like need practicing, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, so basically that's how it started.
Yeah.
Cool. So let's talk more about this point. Why should we as designers, actually care about data, and why should we consider including it as part of our design process? Shouldn't we just leave it for the experts?
To me, I think the best way to think about data is so why, right? The why is basically, it's quite simple, right? It helps us validate our design decisions more, right? So we remove the guesswork in anything that we are designing, or even before we design some solution. It sort of help us like to prioritize which problems to tackle first, right? So it gives you like a hard proof to what you should design or how you should design it, basically.
What I think about is design and data relationship more like the two components in the whole loop of the product development cycle. We are designers, we're not artists, and we propose our design to solve both user problems and also business problems. So instead of being artistic, I think we rather need to be more rational to include data into the design process to get more buy-ins from stakeholders. Like I said, we solve both user problems and business problems. The definition from myself, like business problems are usually quantified as conversion rate problems by our product managers. So basically, they focus on the conversion rate. And to solve these conversion rate problems, I think product managers will form high-level product hypotheses. For example, uh, you know, a very typical example for the product hypothesis could be like based on our prior data insights or data signal or competitive benchmarking. If we build up a new feature, then this new feature will bring us X amount of conversion rate increase. So this sounds like the business side need to be achieved. So product hypothesis is more about high level goal, like I mentioned, and high level measurement. And to designers, the ways to form design hypothesis is more about interpreting the factors that lead to the high level product hypothesis through observing the user behavior changes and the psychological influences that behind these behavior changes, right? So though psychological influence might be a qualitative term, but mass majority is, but it is very much reflected in the result of the quantity, right? For example, how many users change their behavior. And the good thing is we have the luxury of improving those behavior patterns by A/B tests. So like Godot, we have thousands of tests running for each month. So study and getting familiar with this kind of data actually helps us sharpen our instincts. And for long-term wise, I think makes us propose design faster and with less wrong design hypothesis possibly. So that's why I think data is important and should be included in our design process. And one thing I think I might need to be, I think one thing I might need to point out is, design hypothesis doesn't really necessarily positively impact the product hypothesis every time. Since the behavior change might happen because of the design, but the conversion performance might not be predictable, even though we have very strong confidence on the possible behavior change. So I think there is more nuances between behavior change and conversion performances. So actually that's something that make our design works even more interesting than before.
Yeah.
Okay, so we understand and agree now that data is important and can be very helpful in the design process. But, data can mistakenly be considered as something boring and a subject that deals only with numbers, especially for designers who are sometimes perceived as visual creatures. What are we doing to make it more accessible and less intimidating for them?
So there are a couple of initiatives to make it less intimidating, right? And then it's all in the form of learnings, right? So what Joshua did before is to organize classes with partnership with the data science team, right? So which is very helpful. And the goal for those classes is to basically tell our designers what are the types of data that is available and what are the tools that is currently being used by everyone here, right? And then there's another initiative. It's also a form of learning, which is the Data Guild that me and Joshua is currently running, where designers, so we divided into 2 sessions, where the first session is basically to learn how to form a design hypothesis better, right? And then the second session is more of a technical side, where like learning about the tools, like learning about all the
so you guys are breaking it down into different components to help designer better understand.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, I think Javier pretty much mentioned all the things that we are trying to do right now. But I think for a simple start, it's very easy actually. Maybe you reach out to whatever the people from the data team or the business intelligence team. Reach out to them and see, because we are UX designers, we have the strength of making their tools easier. So let's do a quick audit for their tools and start to build up the connection between them.
Yeah.
Start to do something for them. And actually, we are asking something back from them is, okay, so we should build up a very long-term relationship, and then we can actually make that happen for all of those activities like Javier mentioned about. Do like a data guild, data trainings, and also the follow-up like learning clubs that we can do together with them.
Yeah. Actually, Joshua made a good point. Like, I cannot stress enough that building a relationship earlier is the most important thing, right?
Right.
So just looking back, what I did with the design experimentation team is that like they need a designer, and then back then we sort of like don't have enough resources for it. But we still do stuff for them, right? And designing like the online analytics tool for them on the side, like outside of our current scope, which in turn makes them wants to help us more, right? So which is pretty cool.
Just be positive and reach out to them first. And trying to do something for them, and or maybe even organize a launch with them and talk about, hey, what are the, so if like Javier mentioned about, I'm working on the booking form. So what are the data points that we are tracking on the booking form, so that you can start from those kind of data point conversation. And after that, you can ask them to navigate you to the database and show you, okay, so for the booking form, these are the data that we're tracking, and what are the data is actually related to the design, related to the user behavior. Then you can start a 7-second conversation to follow up those conversation that actually you need.
So in doing this process, what are some of your biggest challenges, the one that you are facing or faced in the past, by trying to make it easier for designers to understand data?
The most challenging thing for me is basically including this extra component into my design process, and then also sharing it to other people, right? Because this, when we started working on data, I think there's more questions like pops out here and there, right? And especially when other designers are relying on you to sort of have all the answers, like those are the toughest part, because I think like even now, like even me and Joshua probably wouldn't have all the answers, right? And then including that into our process, and then makes things a bit slower in terms of executing design, right? And basically those are the main challenges that I am facing right now.
So it's an ongoing process that you guys are still learning by doing.
I think the cultural shift is actually the biggest challenge. At the first time we initiate that, data-driven design, or it's not really a big topic like that, but we're thinking about we should include more data thinking into the design process. And we actually advocate this concept to different people. For example, sometimes the PMs actually don't understand, hey, why you guys would like to learn these data tools. For example, they at the beginning they don't really understand why some of the designers like myself and or Javier learn SQL. So I think for learning SQL for myself, even for Javier, I think it's not about learning the SQL clause themselves, but it's more about learning how we track and store the data so that we understand the business components better. Because what we open the door is the learning SQL actually learning open the door for us to step into the data world, and also trying to look into the business components instead of the high level ones. Because I think for designers, we have tried so long time just focus on the high level goals, but what are the actual components within that? Something that we should break down and do a deeper look at it. So that's why I think we should shift the culture and actually advocate that data is a very important process for the designers. And after we have tried to learn those tools and try to learn the data domain, I think for the bare minimum, I'm seeing a lot of good designers actually asking good data questions from now on, which is very visible. And like before, we don't have this capability yet.
Speaking about learning, what are some of your biggest lessons learned that you kind of wished you knew before you starting this process?
So to me, one of the biggest lesson, and I also think it's one of the most important lesson, is when you look into data, you are more prone to confirmation bias, right? Like, say for example, if you have, especially when you have a design solution ready, or especially if you have like a strong belief in one ideas, then you sort of can be like sort of biased in terms of like what type of data that you're looking at, right? So that can be dangerous basically, right?
So confirmation bias, you mean you're trying to prove your
hypothesis. Yeah, you try to prove your design belief, basically. So those things you can easily do it with data, because any type of data that you're looking at, right? You can sort of twist the type of data that you're looking at to be confirming your initial design belief, basically. So those are the things that is quite important and quite dangerous, right?
Yeah, I totally agree. So I think for my personal experience, like you mentioned about the confirmation bias, right? And also I made a lot of mistake of selection bias. that's the beginner mistake. But I think it's okay. There's a very good learning for me as well. During the process, I've been talking to different PMs and also data guys and also developers and trying to avoid that happen again. So basically, the mistake was, from a user standpoint, when we look at the Agoda website search result, you will see the search result page looks a little bit busy for you. We display a lot of information, like different badges of benefits, like breakfast. Breakfast is important, by the way. But we have so many different badges, colorful graphics, visuals happening on the cards, which makes the card very big and very busy. So at that time, my hypothesis is, if I am, from a user standpoint, and also I from my own experience of make bookings on Agoda, I actually not really looking at those components on the card. So that's why I formed the hypothesis. If we simplify the UI, that maybe can make the user experience better. So because we can display the core messages to the user so that it makes it easier for them to make decision. But how do we actually quantify the term of simplify? Because we simplify the UI, you can simplify the color, or you can simplify the information, or maybe we can shorten the language that we used on the card. But my approach at that time is make the card smaller. That was my personal interpretation of simplify it. So because my hypothesis is simplify it, which means we make the card smaller, can help the user, can actually help the conversion. That's my hypothesis. So that's why I go back and take a look at the past experiments, the past A/B tests that could possibly make the card smaller. For example, like if someone removes some components of the card, if someone change maybe the height of the card. So I was trying to find out those experiments to prove my hypothesis, and I actually did. So I actually did a lot of query. By the way, at that time I already know how to do query, so that's why I pull out a lot of experimentation and trying to use that to support my hypothesis. And when I show it to our senior PM, he's very nice, and he told me that, hey Joshua, you are going in the wrong direction, because you cannot avoid the selection bias. And at the time I asked him, what is the selection bias? Basically, you know the result first, and then you trying to find the text or find the A/B tests supporting your hypothesis by those results. But you are, by purposely, you ignore the rest ones. For example, if the rest ones, by simplifying the cards, actually do hurting on our conversion, but I ignored that.
So you only select the one that was winning.
Yes. That's a typical selection bias.
Yeah.
So okay, I think that's a very good feedback for me. So that's why I follow up, and okay, this time I use the same query and I pull out pretty much the same experimentation, but more with experimentation have more results, not just for positively impact on the bookings, but also negatively, or maybe a flat test. So I put together every experimentation that I can found that I think physically can make the card bigger or smaller, because you cannot really make it smaller. You need to compare it both ways. So that's why I pull out experimentation, could potentially make the cards both smaller and bigger. And I don't put the conversion numbers. I just put the list of the experimentation, and I sent to the developers and asked them to to tell me technically, is this experimentation make the card actually smaller or bigger? And then after the rating, I get back the list from developer teams, and I put the numbers for each experimentation. And after that, I feel more comfortable and more confident to propose the same concept again, because I'm still seeing the pattern, but that pattern is more solid than before because you back up with the developers, developers measurement, and developers evaluation on the, if the test can physically increase or decrease the size of the card, and that actually makes me more confident.
So essentially, what both of you are saying is that don't fall in love with your solution and try to be objective when you are working with data.
Yeah,
correct. That's correct. Yeah, that's the overall suggestion. And trying to avoid that. I'm pretty sure that people could, especially for designers who step into this world, they could, make the same mistakes that like we did.
Yeah.
So let's talk about these new designers and designers that are very new to the idea of data. And also, here at Agoda, we have the luxury of being empowered to access and use data. But some of our listeners might be working in smaller companies and with less resources. What would you recommend those guys? How can they start and approach this subject of data in that case?
Yeah, this is an interesting question, but I don't think there is a very good answer to that. I think the concept data is all about measurement or say assessment. So I think they could be reflected in the form of number, but also could be reflected in the form of certain customer behavior, right? So for designers who don't have the luxury of accessing data team, I would recommend them to start from the business result. I mean, what the business is going to achieve, and trying to reverse engineer the business result to see what are the components in it. I know a lot of times that the result was achieved by cross-functional teams, so it could be joint efforts. But what are the parts that mostly relevant to design? So thinking about that, I think that's something that we as designer can do. And also try to split them out from the expected business outcome and trying to figure out how you can make sure you are doing good job, doing good job of influencing the user behavior. So basically, I think get yourself closer to the data thinking, even though for the short term, maybe data support is not very feasible to you. But I believe running every business, there is no escape for anyone to touch data. So there must be data here and there for you to discover. So start from the result, follow the path leading to the result, and you won't miss the data. That's what I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, to me, the other way to utilize to sort of start into this world is basically to utilize whatever you have right now within your company. Like Joshua mentioned about start with the end results, right? Like I'm pretty sure the business intelligence people, if you have any, or even your CEO might have an end goal in mind, which means that obviously for some company they might be focusing on growth, and some company they might be focusing on any other metrics, right? So I think start by asking them, like, okay, so what are the things that you want to achieve, and then have we tracked this or not? And then if you haven't tracked anything at all, then I would suggest start by doing that. Like at least talk to developer and ask them like whether you guys are tracking your product or not, right? Because I think nowadays it's very hard for business to survive without like any data at all, actually. Yeah.
So better understand the objectives and the goals of the business.
Better understand the objectives and goals, and also better understand like what are your current resources, basically. Like you said, like not everyone have a data team, right? But you can sort of start with your developer, and then if they don't have tracking, and then you sort of can, as a designer, like you need to be proactive enough and then ask them to sort of add the tracking, basically.
Okay, we are coming to the end of this episode, and Joshua and Javier, I want to thank you for taking the time today and discussing with us about this interesting subject of data. Before we close, do you have any recommendations, some books, or some advice for our listeners?
I think, yeah. Okay. My recommendation for the designers who would like to step into the data world, it will be, start from asking data-related questions. So, for ourselves, we ran the sessions called Question Burst on data points. By the way, Question Burst is a very useful brainstorm tool that invented by Hall Gregerson, who is the executive director of the MIT Leadership Center. So what we did was, based on the product hypothesis that came out from our product managers, we ran the exercise of a question burst on trying to ask the question around two topics. One is, what are the user behavior data points that we should look at before and after the new feature is built? And the second one will be, and if the product hypothesis is true, what will be the expected user behavior pattern change should be reflected on those data points? That's something that we start with. And I think could be a very good exercise for designers who would like to step into the data world to try as a first step.
I think, to me, if you talk about books, there are books that I think is quite important. To me, there is one book called A Practical Guide to Designing with Data by Brian Suda, right? And then I think start by reading a lot of books is quite important, right? I mean, of course, like, you wouldn't be able to apply everything that you read, right, at the start. But trust me, like, somehow, like, while you're doing your day-to-day job, you sort of can receive an idea of, like, from the books itself, right? So I think it's pretty helpful also.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
All right. Thank you, guys. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Nahum. Very happy to be here today.
Yeah. Thanks for inviting us, Nahum.
Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this podcast, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere you are listening, and share it with your friends and colleagues. Don't forget to subscribe to our show to get notified when we are releasing a new episode. And if you want to learn more about the work of the design team at Agoda, visit agoda.design. Thanks again for listening, and hope to see you in our next episode.